It's the bird emergency where we talk about critically endangered birds, threatened birds, vulnerable birds, and the people who go to great lengths to do their best to make sure that they hang on. I'm Grant Williams, I'm your host. I'm only a pretend scientist, as I've said before. I did horticulture once. But today we're talking to the Research and Conservation Director of the Philippines Eagle Foundation, Mr. Jayson Ibanez. Did I get that right, Jason?
Yeah, yeah, perfect. Grant, hello, good day, and thanks for inviting me over,
Oh, that's a
Grant.
pleasure. And uh, I now know, after speaking to you for a few minutes, why you got the g'day so right. Because you did a good part of your was it your doctoral work or your master's work
Yeah,
in Darwin?
that's right. It's a doctorate, PhD in natural resource management. Yeah,
And let let's go there first before we talk about the origins of the foundation and why it's necessary. How did you end up studying in Australia, and what was uh, your research focused on here?
yeah. Well, so I'm a biologist by training. I took my bachelor's and master's in biology here in the Philippines. And then after doing work for over a decade with the Eagles, I thought, I think it's also important that I study the social science side of conservation work. So there was this opportunity, there's this scholarship offered by the Australian government. It's called Australian Leadership Award. And, I was looking at the program and the support, and I liked it. So I applied for this scholarship, and this was all part of the plan, really, to put more people aspect into the conservation work that we do. And I was very much interested on indigenous people's engagement in conservation, because if I may share, more than 70%, no, of the remaining forest habitats in the Philippines are basically within the ancestral lands, or ancestral domains, as they are called in the Philippines, of indigenous peoples. And after doing nest surveys, after doing research, we always work and get in touch with indigenous people. So I thought, maybe a PhD on natural resource management with indigenous peoples would be very useful for a program. And so I was very successful. I applied for that scholarship, and I chose Charles Darwin University in Darwin, Northern Territory. I can say that that's perhaps the center of Aboriginal territories in Australia. And so I did my 4-year PhD program. 3 years of it is in Darwin, doing the coursework, doing the thesis, and of course, also visiting some of the Aboriginal lands and looking at how the Australian government is doing conservation work with the traditional owners of Aboriginal land. So I focused on integration or merging scientific knowledge with indigenous knowledge as my thesis topic. It's basically about how best do we work with indigenous peoples, and then do fair conservation projects with them, and then them benefiting mostly from this conservation work. And yeah, I graduated in 2015, and that began what we have been calling in our program in the foundation as our culture-based conservation program, which is basically a meaningful and fair conservation partnership that brings tangible conservation results for Philippine eagles, but also improves the lives of indigenous peoples. And I'm really very fortunate and happy to have done that PhD program in Australia.
It, that must have been a really interesting time to be doing that kind of program in Australia, because it's really quite new that it's in the mainstream, that the traditional owners here are involved in programs like that. And I've got a couple of episodes coming up, Jason. One on the golden shouldered parrot, where some pastoralists have been working very closely with the traditional owners in Cape York in far north Queensland to try and preserve what's left of one of the populations of that parrot, which is really rare and has had a whole lot of trapping as a as a pressure on the population, as well as habitat clearing. But going back to Indigenous burning practices has been a key there. And then on the other side of the country, but still in the tropical north, we've got the Gordian finch has been working on a program with the Worldwide Fund for Nature, WWF. So it's really great that that's being integrated here, and I'm really pleased that our government in Australia has helped you take a really important segment of the conservation work back to the Philippines. Now, I'll do a spoiler here, because not only has the Philippines Eagle Foundation been really successful in integrating community with conservation, another one of your foundations in the Philippines, the Katala Foundation, has used a similar model and had really great success in recent times as well. So looks like the way of the future. So tell us about the Philippines eagle. Most people my age are probably aware of it as the monkey-eating eagle. That's how it used to be in books when I was young. But it's an iconic bird in the Philippines. So tell us about how important the Philippines eagle is to the Philippines nation.
Well, the Philippine eagle is, of course, one of the largest raptors in the world, and it is also found only in the Philippines. No, uh, and I think it's just it makes perfect sense that for a national symbol, a bird, no, that's unique only to a country, would fit that distinction. So the Philippine eagle was declared as a national bird in 1995. But unfortunately, although being declared as a national bird, our national symbol is still IUCN critically endangered. No? Um, Primarily because it's very much forest dependent. No? It couldn't live outside of the forest, and unfortunately, majority of the original, pre-colonial forest cover of the Philippines is gone. According to projections, more than 90% of the Philippine archipelago, so that's 300,000 square kilometers. More than 90% was practically covered with ancient forests before Europeans came to the Philippines. But now that's only down to less than 20%. And what's really sad about the Philippine eagle is that it's only found in four major islands of the country. So we have the title of having a lot of islands, 7,000, over 7,000 islands, but the Philippine eagle is found only on four of its largest islands, and that's namely Luzon, Leyte, Samar, and Mindanao. And we think that more than 50% of the 400 pairs that's left, we think that there are no more than 400 Philippine eagle pairs left in the country. 50% of that is found on Mindanao Island, where the Philippine Eagle Foundation is based. No, as of now, the foundation is monitoring. We know of 39 occupied nesting sites across Mindanao. But the estimate is there could be 200 pairs, more or less. So what are the threats? No, it's basically shooting, no hunting. We've tagged Philippine eagles in the wild, and based on our statistics, 6 out of 10 birds that we've tagged are actually shot and killed, and then some of them are still trapped using native snares. No, so think about that: deforestation, and then mortalities. No, and we think it's really high mortality rates due to shooting and hunting. So and being slow in reproduction, it maintains a big territory, more than 7,000 hectares. So these are all this biological requirement pushes the Philippine eagle to the brink of extinction.
Why are they hunted?
Well, sadly, some Filipinos still see a large bird as a food source. Okay, that's one. They're being hunted as source of food. Second is, these Philippine eagles occasionally feed on domestic animals. They prey on monkeys in the wild. That's why they're originally called the monkey-eating eagle. But then that was changed by a president, President Ferdinand Marcos in
Ramos.
1975.
Oh,
Uh,
Marcos changed the name, did he?
yeah, it was Marcos who
Ah,
changed the name to from monkey-eating eagle to Philippine eagle, based on the information that he got from Dr. Bob Kennedy and his team, an American biologist who pioneered research on Philippine eagles, to Philippine eagle. And then it was Fidel Ramos who actually declared it as a national bird. So
the
again,
national
first
bird.
is shooting and shooting as a source of food. Second, trapping and shooting because they're feeding on domestic animals. Still, farmers see them as pests of domestic animals, mainly poor farmers who, you could understand that they value their livestock
Yeah,
more over Philippine eagles. And then, of course, largely, there's still this hunting culture in the uplands, where, at the sight of a big bird, it just makes them feel excited shooting down a big trophy.
I saw in some of the literature when I was researching Jason that um, birds were being um, shot, and if they weren't killed or if they were being trapped, they were being sold. But they were being sold for as little as like 4,000, 5,000 pesos. Um, that that seems sort of ridiculous because I'm sure if there still exists a black market for the birds, they must be hundreds of thousands. I would have thought that crazy collectors would be paying. Now, I don't say that to encourage that activity,
Right.
but I say that to illustrate how little money it takes in a Western context to make a lot of money, a lot of difference to the people who could be protecting rather than hunting the eagles.
Yeah,
So,
you're perfectly right. Yeah.
so how do you how do you enlist the local populations to assist in the conservation efforts?
Yeah, well, that's a very valid observation, Grant. Just to give an example, during the pandemic, we had two cases of Philippine eagles that were trapped, and one was sold for 8,000 pesos. So that's basically very small, no, if you
That's
compare it with U.S. rates, no.
that's 200
So
Australian dollars approximately.
right, 200 Australian dollars. And then another bird, which we just rescued last March, was sold for 5,000 pesos. And in both instances, it was actually concerned citizens, no, concerned citizens who sort of spare the bird from getting cooked by the captor. No? So they paid this amount to get the bird, and then voluntarily turned over the bird to us for rehabilitation and release. And so we're really very happy that there are concerned citizens who knows about this program, and they were willing to shell in money just to spare the bird from a wasteful death. But
I,
I like your point about a very small amount of money that motivates these people to spare it from getting shot. So yeah, in terms of community-based work, again, unfortunately, we still have fellow Filipinos in the uplands who doesn't value the Philippine eagle as many of the lowlanders or people in the cities would value them. So what we're trying to do with our community-based work is to make sure that once they decide not to embrace conservation, they get tangible benefits and they work with us so that eventually they'll get to understand and embrace conservation work.
how how are you in the foundation trying to shift those attitudes where the natural world and everything within it is valuable? Uh, I'm guessing that forestry is still a major source of income in these forested areas. How do you how do you turn around that mindset where the timber has value as as a log, but it doesn't have value as a standing living tree?
Right. Yeah, it's basically partnerships, no, genuine partnerships coupled with what we've been calling right mix of incentives as well as education and law enforcement. So let me also add that in our community conservation work, we practically focus on Philippine eagle nesting sites. No? And in the Philippines, although, if you think about the forest, it's very remote. You might think that these places are not inhabited. But actually, majority of our forests are actually peopled landscapes. No, you have the indigenous peoples, you have the migrants, people who are trying to look for lands that they can till. So most of them go in the uplands, and they're mainly poor by mainstream standards. Okay, so nesting sites. Why? Because Philippine eagles are very loyal to the places where they breed. Now, these are essentially ancient nesting sites, and any nest site that's close to communities, no, they're very vulnerable, especially when they're nesting. So whenever we hear reports, local reports of nesting Philippine eagles, and they're very close to communities, that's where we go and invest on establishing partnership. I've mentioned the culture-based conservation approach. So what is this? This is, offering a partnership with the community, helping them with meeting their aspirations. We help them in planning what they want or what they aspire in the next 5 years as development for their community, and then we help them, achieve these aspirations. It could be economic, health aspirations, education aspirations, depending on what's on the plan. We find partners, we link them with partners, we provide capacity building, and by doing that, we slowly change the perception about the natural world. No, there are instances where communities have traditional practices that conserves biodiversity, so we reinforce that, we strengthen that. So again, it depends on the community, but a very important ingredient of our community-based conservation work is tangible benefits, including economic benefits.
Well, let's pause there for a minute. We'll come right back to where you left off. But when did the when did the foundation begin, and what has been what's really been the history of it, and what have been the really great successes that you can point to in the development of the foundation?
Yeah. Who's the Philippine Eagle Foundation? We're an NGO, a conservation non-governmental organization, not profit. The organization started in 1987. So it took off from a former national program for the conservation of eagles. So the conservation program, as well as the research, started as early as the early 70s, but it was primarily a government program until during the early 80s. Resources have dwindled, and the government wanted to close the Mindanao program. So that's where the first research and conservation program began on Mindanao. But then the staff then of the government program um, asked help from businessmen and politicians in Davao City specifically, and they reorganized the project into a non-profit project, and that's when the NGO started. So, what are the key contributions of the organization for the past? I think we're turning 35 next year, no? So the past 34 years. First, of course, is the first successful breeding, conservation breeding of Philippine eagles in captivity. No, the first Philippine eagle was hatched in 1992. So that was a product of long years of experimentation, of training. No, we have our pioneer biologist who have one of them who has retired already, but he also still acts as consultant. So he has to train with international organizations or zoos like the Peregrine Fund, in UK, and then also in Canada organizations. And then when he came back, he implemented what he learned, and then that resulted to the first captive bred bird in 1992. So the bird was named Pag-asa, and Pag-asa is the Filipino word for hope. No, so that signaled essentially a hope for our national bird by through the contribution of conservation breeding. And since that time, we've bred 27 more birds, no, in captivity, including Philippine eagles pagkakaisa and other birds. No, and two of the birds actually we've loaned as part of a species loan program to a facility in Singapore. This is the first species loan program for the Philippine eagle. Um, Partnership with the Singaporean government. The bird is now at the Jurong Bird Park in Singapore, and then they're trying to breed these birds as well. So that's one, conservation breeding. Second is the first community-based conservation during the early 90s. So we've piloted, I believe, the first community-based efforts for conserving the wild population. And this eventually evolved into now what we call culture-based conservation, where we think that our approaches and engagement of indigenous peoples, no, across the Philippines is very pioneering. We now have 15 indigenous communities helping out Philippine eagle pairs, conserving Philippine eagle pairs. And a specific program now, which is I'm very proud of, which we have learned or shall we say innovated from the Caring for Country program of Australia. It's Ranger program. You know, it's very popular in Northern Territory. We now also do our Forest Guard program with the indigenous people. So trying to provide decent income through forest guarding but then also delivering clear conservation results. So I think that's the three main things that the foundation is basically known for: conservation breeding, our pilot community-based work, and our culture-based conservation and the forest guard program.
What are the tangible benefits that the communities um, get from being involved? You said you asked them to set their goals for like a 5 year period. What do they what do they usually aspire to? And after being involved, what do they usually find that they get, for want of a better term? But what do they usually achieve from being involved?
Yeah. So what are these tangible benefits? You'll be surprised if you look at their all. I think all of the conservation plans would mention livelihood assistance. Okay, it depends on their skills. So this is very much dependent on the competencies and existing skills of the community. Second would be educational support. No, it's a basic need. Families would want their kids to go to school. So this involves, us brokering for construction and setting up of daycare centers, primary schools, close to or within remote communities. And then there's also health concerns. No, we also go into that. No, facilitate um, access to basic health needs, like setting up health centers, getting a partnership with the Department of Health. So these are the three top aspirations. No? So for example, in one of our nesting site, through a partnership with corporate funders, we were able to set up a full elementary school in a very remote community, and this was in early 2000. And the story of the community is that we don't want our kids to walk 4 hours, no, to get to the nearest school. Okay, okay then. If we can help you set up a school here, would you help in protecting the Philippine eagle? So after that, the Philippine eagle pair breeds once every 2 years safely. We get to monitor the birds. We've organized forest guards. I think that's another tangible benefit. They get daily income from doing forest patrols. Okay, we favor them fairly, and then also I guess the non-material incentives such as prestige and pride of doing conservation work, and the government and the general public admiring, or shall we say, patting their shoulders for doing this. So again, a combination of material benefits, no, um, clear income. Now we have indigenous women that we've trained to hand sew plushies, wildlife plushies, and then we sell them on their behalf as tokens. No, and these are really sources of additional income, and through that, they've learned to embrace the Philippine eagle as their own. They always say that, because of this support, we've now considered our resident, our neighbor Philippine Eagle family as like a member of a family to us. So these things, attachments and embracing the Philippine Eagle as part of their community are, I believe, long term outcomes of conservation.
Philippines is a big place. It's far flung. These uh, forest habitats are far from your major cities and towns. And in some places, indeed, I think getting to the centre and the west of Mindanao can be can be challenging. So I'm wondering, now that you have these monitoring systems in place for established nests and the communities being involved, how are up and coming biologists, ecologists who are studying in the Philippines, are, are they wanting to continue their education, their research work, working in those forests, which are becoming harder and harder and harder to find in the Philippines? Do you are you well plugged into the existing academic framework now?
Yeah, well, I have to admit that we still have very few field biologists or field researchers. That's one of the, shall we say, well, challenges.
Can I
So,
ask you, Jason? Can I ask you, is that because there are not the the students wanting to come and be involved, or is it just that the logistics of doing it are really difficult?
well, I think it's also about the priorities of the families of these biologists. No, in terms of logistics, well, there are very few opportunities. I think I could start with that. Very opportunities for few opportunities and resources for supporting field biologists. Like, for example, the Philippine Eagle Foundation, we have a volunteer program, we have internship programs, but we can only accommodate few biologists. No, but also on top of that, I think in the Philippines in general, conservation biology or the work of a field biologist is not seen as something that's really well, brings you a good life, so to speak. No, I'm also a professor in a local university, and I can say that maybe two-thirds of my students, biology students, would go to medicine, and this is basically pushed by their parents as well. As you well know, in the Philippines, parents have a very big influence on the career decisions of their kids. No, but yeah, of course, safety also is a consideration. Not all of the forest of Mindanao specifically is safe for biologists. Yeah, I think the field of conservation is still relatively young. And I could also add that the current situation, the pandemic, is not also helping in terms of engaging more researchers in the field. Because even us, no, that's one of our challenges now. It's quite it takes a lot of resources to organize field expeditions, and then it's logistically it's challenging to bring people in the field. So yeah, I think everyone knows this. No, the pandemic really has a large impact on conservation work, as well as developing new talents to join the very few network of conservationists and field biologists in the Philippines.
And we well know here in Australia that that's not a uniquely Philippines problem. I think that working in the conservation, any of the allied sciences for conservation, is a very difficult way to earn a living because it's not highly valued and there is not a high payoff. You can be you can be the best conservation biologist in the country, and you'll never get as rich as um, well. Look, most people don't aspire to be rich in this field, do they? But you
Right.
certainly are not going to be treated the same way as a medical researcher or a software technician. It's just not seen to be that valuable, and that is one of the challenges for all of us who are interested, is to just keep raising the profile. I, I, I was wondering, Jason, once you have a foundation established and you have great partnerships. I noticed that USAID have been a partner long term with the foundation. But do the governments see that as a way to not continue to be committed to providing support and resources, even if it's logistics or if it's army protection or whatever, if you need to go into some of those dangerous areas? I mean, there are some security concerns in some parts of the Philippines for non-locals. Um, does the government still want to be active, or do they now say you've got the foundation, you look after it?
Well, the government, of course, has a program for the conservation of the Philippine eagle, and it's lodged in the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. So they have a separate program, and this is where they're investing their own resources. No, of course, we're very happy that the government provides uh, in-kind support. No, I could say that during the pandemic, our partnerships with the DNR across different regions allowed us to rescue Philippine eagles, no, across Mindanao. In fact, we've rescued 10 Philippine eagles already just within the pandemic period, and that's one of the highest. No, that's the highest rescue rate ever in just 1 year. In the past, we rescued two Philippine eagles, on the average two Philippine eagles per year, but now 10 Philippine eagles, which is really alarming. So we very much treasure the partnership we have with the national government, but finance-wise, no, we're not getting much of that. But we do get support from the local government units, and I believe it is the local government units, no, the municipalities, the provincial government, who are now stepping up in terms of protecting their natural resources within their territories or within their backyards. So we have wonderful partnerships with local government units. Just last March, one municipality celebrated its town festival in honor of a Philippine eagle family within their territory, and they called it the Banog Banog Festival. No? So the Philippines, we have lots of festivals, and this municipality, which is Manolo Fortich in Bukidnon, is one of the very few municipalities who solely dedicated a festivity in honor of their Philippine Eagle family. So, and then our Forest Guard program is supported by the local government unit. In Davao City, we have almost 200 forest guards looking after four Philippine Eagle pairs, and they're paid and then they're equipped by the city government of Davao, and we facilitate this project. So, of course, more resources are needed, but this is very promising. And again, we're trying to step up our advocacies and partnerships so that more local government units would help in and invest on using the Philippine Eagle as a flagship of forest conservation.
I'll have to get the details off you later, but I want to go to that festival. I want to go to that
Yes.
festival. Um,
Yeah.
uh, that brings me to the thought about developing ecotourism as an income stream for these regions. Do you think that is a sort of short to medium term possibility, or is that quite a long way off into the future, assuming that we get past COVID in the next couple of years?
Yeah. Well, definitely ecotourism is a promising venture for community-based, or shall we say, biodiversity-friendly enterprises. Although, we think that including the Philippine Eagle as part of the ecotourism experience, at least in the wild, is we don't recommend it. There are people who thinks that bringing in bird watchers or photographers to Philippine eagle nesting site and experiencing the birds while they're nesting could be it brings in funds, but we think that it's very risky, especially since we're
Yeah.
dealing with an IUCN critically endangered species. But agricultural tourism, experiencing forests, experiencing wildlife, I think it has great potentials, especially now where I think tourism is also moving towards outdoor activities. Because in a way that's kind of safe, no, as far as COVID is concerned, as long as you're practicing proper social distancing, so people can easily practice that in the outdoors. No, in our region, that's essentially the tourism. Direction. But it takes, I think a lot of relatively some investment in terms of training communities as effective tour guides, the provision of the services to your potential tourists. In fact, we're also doing that. We've trained some community members on basic cookery and as effective tour guide. But it hasn't. I mean, the enterprise hasn't taken off yet. But it really has a great potentials as additional enterprise, no, and income source for communities.
Mm. You mentioned that there's been some successful captive breeding. How how adaptable are you finding the birds to life in captivity? What and what are the real main challenges to setting up a successful breeding pair in captivity?
Yeah. Well, in terms of adaptability of the birds, we think that through proper and sound animal husbandry techniques, we can really maintain them in captivity. And we have cases of birds now that really lived a full life in captivity. And as I've said, we've bred them successfully. 28 Philippine eagles bred in captivity. I think the major challenge really is, rearing or taking care or raising these chicks, and then getting them ready for a life in the wild. That's still a big question mark, or shall we say, a experiment, an ongoing experiment on our part. We released three captive bred birds, and unfortunately, two of them died, and then one we had to capture it again and bring it back to captivity because it's basically used to people. It's used to people, so it won't survive in the wild. So I guess that's the big gap. Rearing the birds suitably, and then before we release them back to the wild, because that's the intention of the conservation breeding program really is, not to breed birds and then release them in vacant habitats or in populations whose numbers are really very low. Um, it's relatively, of course, an expensive uh, program, and recently we also have the challenge of um, development. Increasing build-ups around our conservation breeding facility. Now we run the Philippine Eagle Center. It's the only conservation breeding facility in the whole world, here in Davao City. But unfortunately, development is progress is increasing around the center. We think that the facility is vulnerable to exotic diseases such as avian flu and Newcastle's diseases,
Mm.
poultry diseases. So we're now thinking of setting up a new facility that's relatively isolated, and we're looking at the numbers. It's quite expensive. But for the meantime, we think that the wild population has a fighting chance. So that's why most of our funds are really intended to protect what's left of the wild population, and also prevent more hunting and shooting. And a very promising initiative that we're looking at is what we call conservation translocation, and that is, capturing these young birds in the wild, sparing them from mortalities, and then translocating them or transferring them to protected places that are vacant or whose Philippine eagle populations have dwindled. So that's another exciting aspect of our ongoing conservation work.
How many suitable places around the Philippines are there that might support a translocated pair?
Well, we think that the forest of Leyte in central Philippines are suitable habitats. We've been doing surveys there since 2013, and unfortunately, we haven't seen the birds yet. No, and we think it's either the population numbers there are very low, or we have lost the Philippine eagles totally in these places. Um, you know, it's very interesting. No active nest has ever been discovered on the island, and there are even no rescues of Philippine eagles. No, also from the same island. The last uh, sighting of a juvenile Philippine eagle was in 2015.
Oh no. Oh no, Jason looks like he's hung up and gone. Hopefully he'll be back in a moment. Oh no. Let me see if I can get him out and get him back. No, hang on. Jason, you're back. There we are.
Well, sorry, Grant.
That's
I
okay.
cut off
That's
the Wi-Fi.
okay.
Unstable Wi-Fi. Sorry.
That's okay. I know. I know what it's like. It's no better here a lot of the time. Now we were just talking about Leyte, and you were saying there have been never been found an active nest in Leyte. I was wondering where in Luzon are they still hanging on?
Well, in Luzon, you still have them at the northern Sierra Madre Mountains, or practically the whole Sierra Madre Mountains of the eastern side of the island. So we still have eagles there. We've seen them before. And then, interestingly, in 2015, we found the first Philippine eagle active nest in Apayao. That's in Cordillera, Northern Cordillera. So, this is really very interesting because in the past they thought Philippine eagles doesn't exist in the Northern Cordillera side. So this is in the middle part of northern Luzon, mainly within the provinces of Apayao, and then also areas of Ilocos Norte and Ilocos Sur. So after 5 years of searching for them, we finally found the first active nests. No, not only on Apayao, but the first Philippine active nest on Luzon. No, we know that eagles are there. We see them, but we never found any active nest. So we think, no, you still have a good number of Philippine eagles on Luzon Island, but there are places where we think they've been lost already. So, for example, in Mount Banahaw in Quezon Province, that's a big protected area. We think they're lost there. The Zambales Mountains, and this is in the west side of the island,
Hmm.
and then perhaps also in Bataan. So these are actually potential release sites, no? As long as they're pretty much protected, and of course the people are willing and interested to help with restoring a national icon within their territories.
Hmm. And perhaps that idea of ecotourism is more appropriate in Luzon than trying to apply it to Mindanao in the short term. So that I'm a bit amazed that there are so many places in Luzon uh, where they either might still be or could be re-established if the stock could be found. And you mentioned Samar, didn't you, as being one of the islands where they still exist? Uh, how big do you think the population is there?
Well, Summer Island still has a good lowland forest. You know? I don't know the exact figures, but I think maybe still 70 or maybe 50 to 70% of the island still has good
Mm,
tracts of lowland forest. And we've seen nesting birds in Samar. We've seen one in the center part of the island. We've rescued several birds from there. We've seen several pairs. So we think that the population in Samar is still pretty much in good shape. And we're thinking of, in terms of in the future, future conservation translocation, Samar could be a good source population. No? Young birds, more than 2 years old, leaving their parents' territory, wandering around, and that's several years. No, before a Philippine eagle becomes sexually mature, a male eagle should be around 7 years old, while a female eagle should be 5 years old. So just imagine, 2 years old to 7 years old. That's 5 years of floating around, and that's when they get shot or trapped.
mm,
Majority of the eagles that we've rescued 89 Philippine eagles already since the program began. Uh, Nearly all of them are actually immature birds. So just imagine if we can spare this surplus, no floaters, as they are also
mm,
called,
mm.
no birds with no territories yet, save them from getting shot or killed, and then translocating them to places that are safe. So that would improve the numbers, reduce mortality rates and increase survival rates.
Have you got plans for a structured pilot program for translocation?
Yes, yes, we're actually doing that. The preparations, including social preparations in Leyte. I'm happy to share that the Australian government actually is supporting us on this. The Australian embassy. We're now on our second year of support, trying to establish protected areas within Leyte. Of course, we don't want to release the birds in Leyte unless the place are, protected in paper, but
Mm,
also functionally protected. And then we have now host communities who have been working with. We have three communities already in two possible big forests where we think we can release the birds. We've now established a forest guard program there. We're providing livelihoods, and we're building a network of partnerships, from corporate partners, LGUs. Two of the LGUs, these are municipalities, are now in the process of creating ordinances that would declare the Philippine Eagle as their flagship. And these municipalities will be your host release site. So all of this, slowly but surely, we're trying to build constituency awareness, and once we get the permit from the national government, we'll start translocating birds to Leyte, mainly from Mindanao, and then maybe in the future from Samar Island.
is the genetic diversity of all of the populations adequate, do you think?
Yes, it's adequate. There's still good genetic diversity. We have colleagues from a university in Luzon, University of the Philippines, Diliman. They did the genetic studies of Philippine eagles. All eagles from different islands are, just one species, and there's still genetic diversity, thankfully. And so, we can practically move around individuals without causing any genetic effects or deficiencies to the birds. No? So again, we have the genetic evidences that we can do conservation translocation. There's an impetus, especially now in Mindanao. What's happening with the birds? We've rescued again 10 birds, and just imagine if we can future birds we can spare them from getting trapped or shot and then move them to safe places. And then also we're building a constituency. This is I think the idea really is to bring back a predator to a forest ecosystem where the top the apex predator, the Philippine eagle, has been potentially lost. So the local government likes the idea; it makes sense, and the Philippine eagle is a good flagship also for conserving forest in general.
Now, I I have to ask. It's been bothering me since we first talked about the bird being hunted and being eaten. How can how can they taste better than a chicken?
I don't really know. I
I
don't
mean,
really
I
know.
mean, do people think they taste good? I mean, is or do they or are they being eaten for necessity?
Well, I think part of it is necessity, but also even the hunters themselves. There was one interview I did who practically cooked a Philippine eagle, and he didn't like the meat. He said that it's tough, so it doesn't taste good. So I think the hunting culture in a way drives them to shoot a large bird, but they don't really get sort of a good benefit out of it. Well, for we can understand that for those who owns livestock, piglets, and then goats, and even who are attached to their dogs, because eagles sometimes also take on dogs and cats, domestic cats. They have a motivation to do so, but we're trying to turn that around. You mentioned something about black market. Fortunately, the Philippine eagle is not in the illegal wildlife trade business, which is thankfully it is not. Just imagine if the Philippine eagle feather is as valuable as an ivory. The Philippine eagle would be extinct, I'm sure. So it's basically hunting due to necessity or due to in retaliation to other animals getting predated, and this behavior can be reversed. No, we really believe that this can be we just need to invest on improving it. Boils down to poverty, I believe. Many of the hunters or those shooting the Philippine eagles are really hard up. uh, the people stealing eaglets from the nests, expecting a few thousand pesos of reward. No? This is basically because of poverty, and if we can address that and turn that around, then there's still hope for the national bird and biodiversity in the Philippines in general.
Now, when you're involved in a conservation effort that involves preserving habitat, you are preserving all of the species that are in that habitat. So, what are there other species that the foundation has started to turn its attention to, or are you only focused on the eagle?
Yeah, well, we're very much focused on the Philippine eagle, of course, as a flagship species. We think that it's easy to fall in love with the Philippine eagle. It's a very charismatic bird. We're also using the Philippine eagle as an umbrella species, as you've mentioned. All biodiversity that's within the territory of a protected park, intended to conserve a pair of Philippine eagles, say 7,000 hectares of Philippine eagle territory that's protected. That also practically protects other species. So we're not really focusing on other species. It's basically just the Philippine eagle. We're at the center. Of course, we rescue and rehabilitate other birds of prey.
sure you'll be back in a minute, Jason, with the Wi-Fi. Let's see if you're back. Here he comes. Here he comes.
Hi.
There he is.
Sorry, Grant.
That's
That's the
okay.
second time. Oh
um,
no.
everything's better in the Philippines except
Except
Wi-Fi.
the internet. Except the internet connection. That's
um,
totally right.
uh, you were about to tell us about some of the other birds of prey species that you rescue.
Oh
Um,
yes.
tell us
Hmm.
tell us about the other significant birds of prey that exist in the Philippines.
Yeah, so we have the endangered IUCN endangered Pinsker's hawk eagle. So this is a species of diurnal raptor that's found only on Mindanao and the Visayas region. Okay, and then another endangered species is of course the Philippine hawk eagle in Luzon. Okay, they were formerly the same species. No, these two new species belong to the same species, but then because of genetic data, there was a split. So from a vulnerable status, they now became each species now became endangered. So we're also doing rescues and releases of these hawk eagles. So what we're doing essentially is whenever we go out to do community-based work, it's basically also a work for conserving other biodiversity using the Philippine eagle as flagship. Hornbills. We have three charismatic hornbills in on Mindanao. You have the Southern Rufous hornbill, you have the Rythe hornbill, and the Mindanao hornbill. And these are all IUCN threatened species. Okay, we also have several plant species or trees. Nesting trees of Philippine eagles are at the same time endangered. The Lawaan group of trees, Almasiga. So we think that by sticking with the Philippine eagle and using it as an umbrella, as a flagship, as an indicator species, we're also conserving the rest of Philippine biodiversity, at least the forest's ecosystem.
Hmm. How many raptors are there in the Philippines, approximately?
Yeah, I think we have more or less than 40, 36 to be exact, raptor species, diurnal raptors. And that includes, of course, your falcons as well. Um, yeah,
Goshawks,
yeah,
sparrowhawks.
goshawks.
Yeah.
We have the white-bellied sea eagle. We have the of course, the migratory gray-faced buzzard. We have several migratory species. We have the um, some other like the Philippine serpent eagle. That's an
Oh
endemic
yes. Yeah.
species as well. We have the Philippine falconet, an endemic, uh, small falcon. And whenever we go out, to do surveys, we also take note of this species. Rufous-bellied eagle. We have crested goshawk. Um, what else? And others. No?
Does the peregrine exist in the Philippines?
Yeah, we have
Yeah. Yeah.
two subspecies. One is a resident subspecies, and the other is migratory. Uh, yeah, you can even see them in the cities. No, they're sitting on high-rise towers, mobile towers. So it's becoming a good sort of a novelty to people in the urban areas, especially since bird watching is becoming popular lately.
Oh, that's good to know because um, I haven't been to the Philippines now since late 2016, I think. early 2017, and I would say to people, I want to go bird watching, I want to go bird watching, and everybody thought that I was kooky. It's just like, what? So I'll be really happy if it catches on quite a bit. Same as camping. No one seemed to like the idea of going camping. Um,
Well, I think trekking would be mountaineering would be a more popular term here in the Philippines. We have a good number of mountaineering groups across the country. There are also networks. We get volunteers from these networks. So yeah, trekking and mountaineering, and it's also becoming a popular, shall we say, ecotourism initiative. Like, there are indigenous peoples who are organizing trekking, mountain trekking. We have one partner community whom we have assisted, and they were very successful at organizing this group trekking or mountaineering. So I think that's a very popular outdoor activity in the Philippines.
Now I've only got a couple more eagle questions. One is how how big does an aviary need to be for you to house um, a pair that you might be breeding from, trying to breed from?
Yeah, well, for a pair of Philippine eagles, I think the largest aviary would be uh, as tall as a coconut tree. So maybe that's like maybe more than 10 meters, maybe. I don't know the exact dimensions, no, but we do have domes that are as high as a coconut tree. Um, and it needs to be big, spacious, maybe in terms of the width. It could be, shall we say, maybe 10 meters in terms of width, um, because before you introduce a Philippine eagle pair, you need to, or the individuals together, you need to put a
You need
barrier
to
between
divide them.
them. Yeah,
Yeah,
you need
so
to put a barrier between them
yeah,
and make sure that they're really compatible,
yeah,
because
yeah,
otherwise the very dominant and aggressive female can potentially kill the smaller and more submissive male, no? So a female Philippine eagle could be between 6 to 7 kilos, while a smaller male could be 4 to 5 kilos. So we had cases before where a female eagle actually killed a male eagle when they were introduced outright in the cage. But we do have smaller cages for our imprinted birds. So when you say imprinted, these are birds who are raised and trained to have humans as their surrogate partners. So they're in smaller cages, holding cages where our animal keepers can work with them comfortably. So a surrogate mate or animal keeper would go inside a male eagle's cage and then bring sprigs, bring branches. This is during the breeding season. Uh, put branches on the platform, and then this male eagle would in turn fly around with that branch. It's as if offering a twig or a branch to the surrogate pair, and then that would entice it to eventually land on the shoulder of the animal keeper and then copulate. No, and then of course the surrogate partner would catch the semen and then put it in a syringe, and that would be used for cooperative artificial insemination. So the cage needs to be small so that they can work comfortably. The animal keepers can work comfortably with the animals. So we're doing both cooperative artificial insemination and natural pairing at our facility in Davao City.
with the artificial insemination, Jason, is it well, one, have you got the technique down so that it's quite a successful way of of producing eggs, and are you are you able to take eggs from a pair that are imprinted and be able to put them into a nest where they can be raised by eagles that are not imprinted? Is that
Yeah,
a
for the
possibility?
yeah for the cooperative artificial insemination, I believe we're quite successful at it. We've bred birds out of the 28 birds. There's Pag-asa and then Pagkakaisa. They both came from the same female, and then a few more birds. And then we're also successful at the natural pairing techniques, where a natural pair lays an egg. We take the egg and then artificially incubate it. You mentioned something about natural rearing. So that's basically after the egg hatches in the incubator. We opt to artificially incubate the eggs to prevent accidental
Accidental
cracking,
loss? Yeah,
loss of
yeah.
these eggs. Um, but there's also possibility that the chick, or the once the egg hatches, and we're sure that it's healthy, you can sort of reintroduce it back to the parents, so they would take care of it, and that would, of course, avoid malimprinting. No, we haven't done that yet. That's one of the things we want to do once we transfer to a different facility. Our biologist at the Philippine Eagle Center came up with specific cage designs. There's a specific cage for that, and that's one of the things we'll be doing fundraising for next year, with establishment of the satellite facility. And so yeah, we think we've mastered the cooperative artificial insemination techniques. The only reason why we're not producing birds now is that the our birds, many of our breeding birds are already old, so they're practically retirees and they're not as productive. Now we have a new batch of young eagles, but they're still very young. No, we're still waiting for them to start.
Transition period.
Yeah, transition period. So while in the transition period, we're planning to invest more on establishing the facility, the right facility with the right equipment and tools, and that's hopefully at the foot of Mount Apple, which is a natural habitat and very safe for the Philippine eagles. It's also far from built-up areas and also communities.
Last question on the husbandry and whatnot of the eagles. When you remove an egg and incubate it in the incubator, do you give the birds a dummy egg, a replacement?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So the guys at the, so that's, well, disclaimer, no, I'm not, I don't do that on a daily basis. No, I'm more of a field worker, but our
yeah.
colleagues at the breeding facility, they do that. They replace it with a dummy egg and take it away again after a few days, because in the past we do double clutching. That would
Ah, okay.
allow the,
Yeah,
egg, the
yeah.
pair or the female to lay an egg again. So we had cases of successful double clutches.
Hmm. Oh, that's good. Well, the knowledge is obviously being built up year after year. You build on every little discovery, and hopefully greater and greater success. Jason, if someone's listening and they want to support the work that the foundation does, what's the best way for them to um, support financially or in any other way?
Well, we would really appreciate, if you can spread the word about the work that we're doing. If you want to know more about our operations, our activities, uh, check our website. It's www.philippineaglefoundation.org. And if you also wish to donate, to help us fund the care of Philippine eagles in captivity at the center, we have So at the moment, 36 Philippine eagles that we're taking care of. Some of them are breeding birds. And then we also have over 100 more animals, rescued wildlife, raptors, and also mammals such as deer and even crocodiles. We have rescued crocodiles also. So any amount that you can donate to us, to sustain our work, especially in this pandemic. Unfortunately, because of travel restrictions, we've lost many of our visitors. No, our visitor traffic has gone down substantially from over 200,000 visitors. No, every year pre-COVID, we only got 2,000 in 2020. 2,000 visitors. So that really financially hurt us. So any amount that you can donate would be very much appreciated. And also, please, like our Facebook page. We post on social media our work with communities, our rescues and releases. We've released 4 Philippine eagles already during the pandemic period. And we're fundraising to release 2 more Philippine eagles that we have successfully rehabilitated. So again, if you can help us make this happen, this would mean a lot to the Philippine Eagles and also the places where they will be released to, because we're starting efforts also to conserve these patches of forest.
Now, now you heard it from Jason there. You can spread the word by sharing the podcast and checking out the Facebook page. Obviously, I'll have all the links in the description and make it easy for you to check out more and more of the foundation's work. Jason, I nearly forgot you. I'll never hear the end of it from my friend Jesse if I don't ask you about, was it Pamiana?
Pamana.
Pamana. Tell
So
me the
yeah,
story.
well, so Philippine Eagle Pamana is a rescued bird from northern Mindanao. He was rescued as a very young eagle, no, barely 2 years old, and we were successful at rehabilitating the bird. And then we released the bird in a protected area in 2015. So the name Pamana means heritage or a gift. Um, but unfortunately, after 2 months of monitoring of life in the wild, um, the bird was shot, by a hunter living at the peripheries of this protected area, which is really very sad because we've done a lot of education campaigns, but I think that's the reality of having hunting, hunting within even protected areas. No, only a single person who has this his hunting culture in him, undoing the many years of rehabilitation and education work that we did. But that's also an eye opener on how to work effectively with communities. We've learned a lot of lessons from that release, but again, we're trying our best to spare other eagles from having the same experience. And so that's a sad story, but I can assure you that that experience also resulted to some modifications and improvement in the way we do community-based conservation. So not all hope is lost with the passing of Pamana.
You learn every time. Every time you learn something new. Now,
Definitely. Yeah.
now Jason, I have to apologise for the listeners. I'm going to make a visual reference. Uh, Behind you, is that a Philippine cockatoo in that picture?
No, it's actually a white-bellied sea eagle.
Oh, it's a white-bellied sea eagle.
It's a
All I
nesting.
all
Yeah,
I can
I
see
think.
is the white. So I wondered whether you just had the iconic endangered birds of the Philippines in your house. Now we're going to move on to the to a bit of the fun stuff, Jason. Um, when you're out doing field work, what field guide do you use in the Philippines?
Field guide. Oh, you mean the reference?
Yeah, so you can tell
Yeah.
what it is you're looking at.
Well, we've been using the classic uh, Guide to the Birds of the Philippines by Dr. Bob Kennedy and his co-authors. No, one of the co-authors of this book, Field Guide to the Birds of the Philippines, is our former research director, one of
Mm.
my mentors, Dr. Hector Miranda. So he actually did the painting, the plates for raptors, including the Philippine eagle in that book. So I had a very special gift, no, from uh, Hector, and I had the signatures of all the authors in that particular book. So there are new field guides out there. They've changed names of the birds. English names have changed, even scientific names have changed. But for sentimental reasons, I still use this field guide. It's a book basically. It's not handy to bring in the field, but again, for sentimental reasons, I bring it with me. And then we also had digital plates, no, in my cell phone. So that's also a handy reference whenever I
Yeah.
go out in the field.
Now, I believe there's a new app for the birds of the Philippines. Are you using that one yet?
Well, I haven't used that yet. I should look into it. No, I haven't used that yet. But yeah, thanks for informing me. I should check that out.
Indira recommends it. So,
Oh
yeah.
yeah. So maybe Indira is one of the developers.
Possibly. That's a reference to our friend Indira from the Philippines, Cockatoo Foundation, Katala Foundation.
Yeah.
Um, now, now, you spent time in Northern Australia. Where else have you worked apart from your patch of the Philippines?
Um, well, basically, it's just the Philippines in terms of fieldwork. I had training in some places. Like I was very fortunate to do a almost 2 months internship in Panama with the Peregrine Fund. They have a very impressive conservation program for the harpy eagle. And that's where I had the chance to handle a female harpy eagle, which is really huge. Like
Hmm.
it's shall we say the heavyweight of the raptors, no? And that's where I learned also telemetry techniques. They were monitoring harpy eagles, attaching satellite transmitters, and that's where basically I got the skill. And then when I went back to the Philippines, and that was in 2008, I went back to the Philippines. I started also the same program, and we've now tagged, if I'm not mistaken, 26 Philippine eagles with trackers already. So yeah, that was a very foundational experience, getting to see the forest of Panama, and then also working with the wonderful guys of the Peregrine Fund there.
There's so many questions I could ask you about the telemetry that you might have gathered, but maybe we'll leave that for uh, a, a
Another
follow up
session.
a follow
Yeah.
up episode, which I'm sure will be required. But Jason, having been to Panama, having been to Australia, working in the Philippines, what's your favourite bird?
Favorite word? I think it's obvious. No, basically it's the Philippine eagle. Like I fell in love with the bird as a young boy. Uh, seeing its photo in an old National Geographic magazine. I think that's where it all started. But if you would ask me, a second bird that I love, then that would be, of course, the Philippine trogon. No, the Philippine trogon is a very beautiful bird, very colorful. They're endemic to the Philippines. The males are more colorful than the females. They have this melodious call. I just enjoy looking at the Philippine trogons. So I think that's the two top birds that I love. If you
Is
ask me about Philippine birds,
is the trogon uh, widely distributed, or is it very difficult to see in the Philippines now?
it's still widely distributed. If you're in a decent forest, in an old growth forest, and even secondary forest, you can see it. It has this very melodious call that you can actually mimic, using playbacks. So in a way that can lure the birds. So I can say that they're pretty much easy to see in the forests if you're in the forest interiors. Of course, if you're in the right place. They're not yet threatened, IUCN wise, but yeah, they're really very beautiful birds.
I'll put that on my list now. Jason, where's your
Would be
favorite?
happy to bring you to places here in
I
Mindanao where we can see them.
don't, don't worry. I'll be tapping you on the shoulder and asking for some localities. Uh, what what's your favorite place that you have been bird watching?
Favorite place? That would be Northern Cordillera in Apayao province, where we saw the first active nest of Philippine eagles in Luzon. It's one of the last strongholds of lowland forest in the country. Um, and what I really admire is, they have this traditional practice in that part of Luzon. You have there the indigenous Isnag tribe, and they have this practice of protecting or setting aside forests whose owner has recently passed away. So they call it lapat, and it's we believe that it's this practice that kept the forest intact across generations. So if you again you've mentioned about ecotourism, this is a perfect place for bird watching. You can see magnificent birds just beside the road. They don't hunt the birds. Guns are banned, no, within the province. You don't see. There's very few people who's hunting these birds, and I believe that's the reason why the birds there are relatively not afraid of people. So you can see them up close. There was a plan by the provincial government to popularize bird watching prior to COVID, but again, unfortunately, COVID came, so that plan didn't materialize. But it's so beautiful that we've been helping the province have it declared as a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve because we believe that it's one of the best examples of culture and biodiversity existing together. And I guess that's the reason why the Philippine Eagles are also there. So, Apaya would be a good place to go, Grant, if ever you can visit the Philippines. I'll be happy to bring you there.
Well, I'll be back as soon as I can. Soon as they let us out. Um, Jason, um, have you got a location that is on your bucket list for uh, for bird watching or just for enjoying nature in general?
Bucket list. In the Philippines, that would be Palawan. I haven't explored the forest of Palawan. Of course, you don't have Philippine eagles in Palawan. That's why we never had the chance to do field work there. But I've been to conferences in Palawan and Puerto Princesa, but I never really had the chance to go inside the forest and do bird watching. Uh, I've I've intended to visit Indira, who is a close friend. We're both recipients of the Whitney Fund for Nature grant from UK, including another dear friend from the north, who's working on Philippine crocodiles, the IUCN critically endangered crocodile, Tess Balbas. He's also the operations director of Mabuaya Foundation. You know. So we both want to go to visit Indira and also do bird watching in Palawan. So that's in my bucket list. Hope to do that soon
And
after
anywhere
the pandemic.
and anywhere worldwide that you've got penciled in that you really would love to get to?
That would be any place the in South America, you know,
And
and do bird watching as well. No, I had a chance to see the birds of Panama. I would want to see birds in South America, tropical jungles.
so, what's the bucket list bird?
The bucket list bird. I haven't really thought about that. I still, in that phase of basically seeing as many birds as possible from different places. Uh, but perhaps top of the head would be the kakapo, perhaps.
The kakapo,
Kakapo. Yeah,
subject of the last episode of the bird emergency.
that's good. I'll tune into that definitely. Yeah.
And is there um, when when you're out in the field, is there a piece of equipment that you couldn't live without?
A piece of equipment would be, of course, a binoculars, and that's Swarovski binoculars. I have this.
Swarovski.
Yeah,
Okay,
I have.
and
I have this
and
gift from a
and
friend.
I so are they 8 by 50s or what?
It's
What are you
basically
using?
10 by 42.
10 by 42.
That I just did a bird watching this morning. We're celebrating, of course, it's International Biodiversity Day today. We're managing a woodland, and part of the celebration is a bird watching, public bird watching activity. So I was, just showing off the Swarovski 10 by 42 binoculars that I got as a gift from one of the master landsmans of Swarovski. He visited the Philippine Eagle Nest on Mindanao. He was really very happy, and he gave us six Swarovski binoculars and two field scopes, and it's still with us today. Very, very durable and high quality.
Well done, you. Well done, Swarovski. Good on you for supporting the foundation. That's nice. Getting a couple of field scopes. Very, very nice.
Yeah, very, very good investment.
Yeah. Now, do you keep a list? Can you tell me your number?
Oh, you mean the birds that I've seen so far?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
Well, I've lost track of it. Sorry, Grant.
Oh
I
no,
have
that
lost
that
track of it.
that's good. Well, we we say that the bird nerds, bird people, are on a spectrum. And at the extreme end of that spectrum are the people who can tell you the number, and they can tell you how many in each family, and they can tell you how many on each continent. So
I'm not
good.
in that bracket.
No, 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 me either. A long, long,
Yeah.
long way. Um, when, when you go out, you've been out today on a public event, but when you go out bird watching for yourself, do you sort of keep a note mentally of how many you've seen, or do you just enjoy the experience?
Well, I could say that I'm more of the, enjoy the experience type, like spend time with the birds and then admiring them. When I was still young, when I was still a young researcher, of course, I'm very much into, listing the birds, both as part of the work and then also as a personal pastime. But maybe if you're, I don't know, in my case, I just love enjoying the birds as I see them, and it's making these connections, shall we say, with these birds. When we went out this morning, I think we just, because I was with a group of 15 um, um, tourists, shall we say. So we only had a very few numbers of, I think, just 20 birds. We've seen 20 birds, but of course you're with newbies. But I did enjoy it. I did enjoy the bird watching initiative. So yeah, I think I'm more of the moment person. Enjoying the birds as I see them.
Mm. Well, that's good to know. An immersive bird watcher like
Oh
myself.
yeah,
I
that's the
like that.
immersive memory in
Yeah,
immersive bird
yeah,
watcher,
yeah. I like that very much. Uh,
and maybe
so
reflective bird watcher also.
yeah, well, um, actually, that leads me to a question that I don't usually ask, but um, have you noticed that the bird bird life generally in the Philippines is rapidly declining, or do you think it's fairly stable?
Well, bird life in general, I believe, is still unstable in the sense that we're still losing forests. Um, you would imagine that with perhaps increasing awareness and values for more protected areas, that more areas gets functionally protected. But sadly, still some sites are still being deforested as we speak. Especially now, no, during the pandemic, we've seen more slash and burn farming because rural communities have to cope up with economic hardships. They need to produce more food and sell their crops. So, uh, but I think we've also seen resilience among some bird species. They're hanging out. Um, they're hanging in there. For example, in this small patch of forest that we did bird watching. We heard calls of the hooded pita, which is it's not an endangered species, but it's a ground bird, and you would think that they're vulnerable to exotic rodents or rats, no? But in this particular small forest, it appears to be still there, no? And then some parrots, and then guyabiero, um, some endemic birds. So as long as they're not shot or killed or trapped, we think that they can really adjust to some modified forest or even small patches. So that in a way is a ray of hope for these birds. But overall in the Philippines, we still need to do more work in terms of protecting and restoring forest habitat, which is our ancient vegetation, by the way. No? We need to rebuild more forest in the Philippines, and we need to do it soon.
Now I can't resist this, Jason. How did you say the hooded? What was that? The hooded.
Hooded pita.
Now you spent time in Darwin. You know how we would say that here. Hooded pitter.
Hooded
It's a
pita.
hooded pitter, mate. So,
Hooded pita, mate.
hooded pitter.
Yeah,
We
unfortunately, I never got to do the. I never. What's this like? Because some of my Filipino friends, no, they got the accent when they went back to the Philippines. I never had it. So
Of course, we've got the noisy pitter, mate. The noisy pitter. So, so Jason, it's been a delight. I hope that the travel restrictions and everything come down fairly soon, and perhaps we could do a follow up episode sitting at the same table, and maybe without your family having to duck down and run backwards and forwards. Tell them I'm very sorry for them.
sorry for
They,
that.
they really didn't need to try and hide. And something I've noticed about your place, because I speak to people in the Philippines often, where are the chickens? I haven't heard one rooster.
Yeah. Well, I'm in a subdivision. I think but we have fighting cocks,
I
no?
was going to
But
say, there's always a fighting cock. Someone's got a rooster in every. I never speak to anyone in the Philippines without hearing a rooster. So
I'm fortunate that I'm maybe like 100 meters away from the closest um, poultry. But yeah, but I
well,
have dogs and I have cats. Now sometimes the cats would pass in front of the computer. They're
uh,
outside, so
don't worry,
yeah.
the listeners have met your dogs. So it's been great. Thanks so much, Jason. I hope that you just go from strength to strength with the foundation, and many more nest sites are discovered, and well, that you win the war. You win the war to
Yeah.
save the Philippines eagle.
Thank you very much, Grant. This is really a pleasure, and of course, thanks for featuring our work in your podcast. And congratulations, and also cheers to more sessions.
Well, thanks for doing the work. That's why I'm here, is to feature the work that you and people like you are doing, and and I hope that your students, because you mentioned that you're teaching, you're a professor at the uni. I hope that heaps of people want to follow in your footsteps. I'm Grant
Thanks for the
Williams.
kind words. Stay safe, Grant, and again, see you in flesh soon.
I hope so. That's been the Bird Emergency. Thanks so much for listening.